Hi and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about TAPS or twin anemia polycythemia sequence, what it is, how it's diagnosed, and our experience being diagnosed. If you're new to my story, please check out my bio. I've got lots of links and our socials as well, so you can have a read of our backstory. Otherwise, I will be posting videos quite regularly, so please subscribe. All right, let's get into it. I just want to preface this by saying that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional. I only know what happened with us, but I am very passionate about TAPS and raising awareness, and I am well connected in the TAPS community. However, if you do have questions about your case, please see your doctor and ask questions of your doctor. I will be posting some videos about maybe what questions you could ask in the future. However, I just want to mention that I'm not a doctor. I don't know everything. I might make mistakes. I'm just an average person that was diagnosed with TAPS. But again, I am very, very passionate about raising awareness and connecting with other people that have been through it. So what is TAPS? So I will say that I do have some notes because I don't want to get it wrong. It is one of those things that's really hard to explain to people. So I've just written some things in my own words so that I can explain it quite clearly. And this is how I explain it to other people that aren't medical professionals. So basically, twin anemia polycythemia sequence is a rare disease in twin and other multiple pregnancies where there is a shared placenta. Basically, due to the tiny connections, the blood flow becomes unequal between the babies, causing one baby to become anemic, so they don't have enough red blood cells, and the other one becomes polycythemic, or they have too many red blood cells. So the doctors described that to me like the anemic baby has blood like pink lemonade or rosé wine, and the other baby who is polycythemic has blood too thick like ketchup or tomato sauce. So both babies can suffer heart failure for different reasons. And I will also say there's two types of TAPS. So one is spontaneous, so that was what happened in my case, or there's another form which happens after laser surgery for twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. So some of you may have heard of twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. It's important to note that TAPS is not twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, and it's not a form of twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. They're completely different diseases. So TAPS is based on the tiny connections in the placenta and is also based on blood concentration, whereas twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome is because of the large connections in the placenta, and it's also blood volume, and that will display quite clearly in ultrasound, like with fluid differences and bladder differences and things like that. Whereas TAPS is really quite hard to diagnose. There's only kind of one reliable way to diagnose TAPS, and that is through the middle cerebral artery Dopplers. The babies under ultrasound may display other things, like the anemic baby might have an enlarged heart, or the polycythemic baby may have what they call a starry sky liver. In TAPS, the babies won't show fluid changes or bladder changes, which is quite common of twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. The other thing about twin-to-twin and TAPS is that twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, they actually know the best treatment, which is laser surgery. With TAPS, it's a relatively new disease. So it only happens in about 3 to 5% of shared placenta pregnancies. And it's a relatively new discovery, so under 20 years. So the only reliable way to diagnose TAPS is through the middle cerebral artery Doppler. So that's a little vein in the brain of the baby, and they basically take a measurement or a Doppler measurement to kind of see how fast the blood is flowing through each baby. If there's a big enough discrepancy between the blood flows of the babies, that's when TAPS can be diagnosed. So this brings me to how I was diagnosed with TAPS, or my babies were diagnosed with TAPS. I will refer to my notes a little bit because I don't want to miss anything. So I'll start from the beginning. So my husband and I had some fertility issues, and we did IVF to get pregnant, which is something that I'll talk about in another video. I'll go into detail about that. So I actually didn't find out until we were 13 weeks that I was pregnant with twins. Prior to that, it was just my obstetrician doing scans at 7 and 11 weeks just to check that I had a viable pregnancy. So when I walked into that 13-week scan, obviously it was a massive shock to find out that we were having twins. From there, on that day, the professor of the sonography business actually gave us a call and went through kind of all the complications that could happen from an identical twin pregnancy, or specifically one that was a shared placenta, which was in my case. So we had what they call an MCDA or monodi or MODI pregnancy. So the babies have a shared placenta and they each have an amniotic sac. So monochorionic diamniotic is the pregnancy that we had. So he talked about twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, he talked about TAPS, and he talked about growth restriction. But the overriding message of that phone call was, you'll probably get to 37 weeks and deliver your babies without complication. That's what is most likely to happen. The professor of that business also sent us a best practice statement from the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. That particular best practice statement is called Management of Monochorionic Twin Pregnancy. I will actually link that because it is a really good best practice statement to actually give to your obstetrician or doctor if you have this type of pregnancy. So from there, we kind of put it out of our minds. We just had kind of the view that we would give birth to two healthy babies at 37 weeks. But obviously, the due date kind of had come a little bit closer than what we thought, especially because the best practice statement says that MCDA twins should be born at 37 weeks or earlier. We actually decided to get referred to our public hospital. We couldn't continue paying for private scans. They were very, very expensive, especially with twins. So we got a referral to our local hospital, and they actually labelled the pregnancy high risk immediately, which we kind of knew. I mean, it's a shared placenta pregnancy. You're supposed to have one baby attached to one placenta. That's obviously the safest. Having two babies attached to the same food source, we kind of knew that it was going to be risky. So there wasn't any surprises there. However, we had a 16-week and a 20-week scan and everything was fine. So we walked into our our MFM appointment, or maternal fetal medicine appointment, at 22 weeks, expecting everything to be fine as it had been before. And at that first appointment and that first scan at the hospital, even though we were in the room for a really long time, I'm talking like an hour and a half, we still had no idea that anything was wrong. The sonographer gave us no indication that something was wrong. I was just saying to my husband, like, can you go find someone and hurry them up, because I've got other appointments in the hospital that I have to do today, because we're 22 weeks and this referral is extremely late and we need to hurry up and get back to work. And then after a very long wait, the doctor walked in, or the obstetrician walked in, and told us what the results of the scan was. Now, he kind of started off going, oh, there's something called twin anemia polycythemia sequence, and we do believe as a result of the scan today that your babies have this condition. Learning that there was something wrong with our babies and that it was quite serious was obviously completely devastating. I was already so in love with my babies and I was so excited to meet my little girls. What also impacted that day was that my mum had terminal cancer and she was actually on end of life care that very week that we found out about the TAPS, and all of a sudden everything was so uncertain. The doctor then told us that most TAPS babies come at 32 weeks because it becomes very difficult to treat after that point. So that day I was absolutely just heartbroken and devastated and hysterical. Like, I just could not bring myself together. I was blaming myself. Surely it's my fault, right? The placenta is in my body. And, surely it's my fault. Have I been eating the wrong things? Was it my weight? Was it my age? Was I, because I was already high risk, was I putting these babies that I was bringing into the world at an even higher risk because of those factors? I was assured that that's not the case at all. It's just one of those things. Like, I couldn't control my embryo splitting at all. And when there's a shed placenta, unfortunately, some of these things can happen. I just happened to get the rarest of those conditions, which was just horrible. My husband and I decided to take the day off that day. So we basically spent the day crying, researching what we could, looking up as much information as we could, connecting with people. So we found tapsupport.com and their fabulous Facebook support group, which was amazing, and kind of connected ourselves with people who had been through TAPS, because we also didn't know what to ask at the next appointment. Like, what do you ask? We were just so lost. We still wanted to be prepared to, go to the next appointment with some questions. So we had another appointment 2 days later, and we had a second scan to confirm that the babies did have TAPS. We were hoping a little bit that they didn't, and maybe they got it wrong the first time, but I think we knew deep down that they actually did have TAPS. And we also had a consult with a doctor or obstetrician from MFM at the Mater Brisbane. Now, the Mater are world leaders in fetal therapy and high-risk pregnancies, especially ones that may require treatment. So that doctor confirmed that we actually had stage 2 TAPS, and he also went through the treatment options. So the doctor went through the treatment options, and I'm not going to go through all of those. I do recommend that you go to tapsupport.com. I'll link them below so that you can read about all of the treatment options available. So he told us about laser surgery, and just like in twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, with TAPS, they can go in and laser the tiny connections between the babies. He also talked about in utero transfusion. So basically they would go in and give donor blood to the anemic baby and take out blood of the polycythemic baby and replace it with saline. So the problem with that is that it's a temporary solution. And then the third option that he talked about was what they call expectant management. So expectant management is basically a wait and see approach. They do know with TAPS that it is slow moving, so they do have some time. It's not like urgent if it's caught early enough. So they do know that they have some time, and this is what they chose with us. They usually like to take a conservative approach because of that slow moving process. Also, it can actually reverse itself in rare cases, or the babies can actually adapt and become quite stable. So we were put on expectant management or wait and see, which meant that we had weekly scans. We also asked questions like, what would be the trigger to actually do treatment? So basically, what would cause them and what are they looking for that would trigger them to need to go ahead and do one of the options like laser therapy or an in utero transfusion. And what they said was that they would be looking for if the babies became distressed. So with the weekly scans, they would be monitoring quite closely. They also instructed me to come to the hospital if I had the slightest anything. So if I had spotting, if I had reduced movement, anything concerning, I was to go to the hospital immediately. I'm lucky at my hospital that they have a maternity assessment centre. So it's like an emergency centre or emergency department for pregnant women. So with expectant management, it's definitely the least empowering treatment option. You don't know what you're facing week to week, and even though we believed that we were in really great hands, it's still very scary, and I worried about my babies all the time. I worried about the baby when I thought it was just one. I just always wanted to have scans to make sure that, the baby was okay. And then when there were two and we found out they were sharing a placenta, I worried about them then. And then to find out that we had TAPS, like, it was just absolutely devastating. Also, the day that we had our second scan, my mum actually passed away. So it was a very, very emotional time. So we did take the advice quite literally, and we had a lot of hospital visits. We were in there at the first sign of anything. It didn't matter. I was in hospital if I felt like the slightest thing was wrong. It was such a scary time, and being such a rare disease, there wasn't a lot of people that I could connect with online. I think there's a couple of reasons. One of them is the rarity of it. The second thing is a lot of it is quite, missed and underdiagnosed. And the third thing is once it's happened, people kind of go back to their normal lives and don't really want to talk about it. For me, I need to talk about it. I need to connect with others, and I really want to help others. And I'm hoping that you'll find this video helpful. I do encourage you to go online and go to tapsupport.com to find out more about TAPS, especially if you have been diagnosed and you want to find out more. Also join their Facebook support group, which is absolutely brilliant. The parents there are phenomenal. People are going through it. They've been through it. Some are years and years out from TAPS, and there's all people, like people from all over the world there, all walks of life. And it's a very, very supportive environment. So I'll link those pages below. If you have any questions of me, please pop them down below. I do plan on speaking a lot more about our story. So I'll go through what we had as treatment and obviously the rest of the pregnancy, and I'll talk about everything that happened quite openly. So yeah, please pop those questions below, and I hope you'll tune into the next video.